You're listening to Stealing from Wizards, Volume 3, Kidnapping, by R.A. Consul. Chapter 13, Having a Ball. Summer Court Samhain traditions had been taught and tested at school in the weeks before the field trip, and Kuro was grateful for it. Navigating the event would have been impossible otherwise. Tirnanogians share a deep cultural anxiety about sticking out. The fear that anyone might say, do, or wear the improper thing at the improper time is crippling for them. The idea of wearing the wrong-colored socks or an inadequately starched collar is more terrifying than an angry swarm of piranha gnats. The potential for making physical contact with another person without clear and explicit consent, signed in triplicate, could send members of the summer court running for the hills. To ease their worries, any formal gathering is meticulously planned. Times, meals, wardrobe, musical selections, all are detailed and shared with guests well in advance. Of course, given such clear and well-documented expectations, the tiniest deviation would be amplified. The addition of an unsanctioned hair clip, a brief touch of pinky fingers, or an improvised twirl during a dance were all invitations for salacious gossip. For Kuro, blending in was an impossible goal. He belonged at a summer court ball no more than an octopus on a lacrosse field. His goal was merely to not ruin it for anyone else. Even that seemed like an insurmountable chore. Beside his new formal outfit was a booklet with the details of the evening. It was nearly a novel, containing everything up to and including the appropriate manner in which to hold and apply each fork. It took considerable aid from Arthur to correctly order the layers of dress and knot his bow tie. He also had to enlist Charlie to help tame his mane. Marie would have been a stronger choice, as she had experience managing uncooperative hair, where Charlie's was disorderly merely out of enthusiastic neglect, and Arthur's just did whatever he told it to. Marie was, however, mysteriously unavailable. When Kuro and Arthur inquired, Charlie dismissed her absence as being entirely ordinary and nothing to worry about, which raised panic in the boys. Nothing was so suspicious as Charlie saying something wasn't worth talking about. Had Marie been sick, upset, or getting herself into some kind of exciting trouble, Charlie would have been talking their ears off about it. Dismissing the topic as uninteresting, then rambling on about the different braids she'd tried on Henrietta the Unicorn, was a jarring reminder that Charlie could and did keep secrets, and the only way to know she was doing so was by the shape of the void around which her conversation flowed effortlessly. Attempts to pry loose the secret were met with condemnation for trying. Even if she did have a secret, which she definitely didn't, did they think she was the sort of friend who would betray confidence? Did they think so little of her? That quieted Kuro and Arthur, but didn't lessen their concern. As a Blandlander, Marie was even less equipped than Kuro to manage the nuances of a royal ball. There was little they could imagine her being engaged in that wouldn't land her in a mess of trouble. At the appointed time, Kuro left his friends to join the queue to be announced into the feast hall. The assigned order for entry served to avoid any potential embarrassment of someone like Evelyn Lemieux-Dees being announced to an empty room. As Kuro had no pedigree or worth, he was near the front of the line, right after the Blandlanders. Upon arrival, though, he found himself to be at the actual front of the line, along with an ongoing catastrophe, which, for once, had nothing to do with him. The fireflies were missing. All of them. Worse still, whenever a page was sent off to find them, they returned shortly with word that everything was fine and the festivities should proceed. The royal steward was beside himself. He was being forced to make an impossible choice between not following the correct order of events and starting late. Kuro's timely arrival tipped the scales. While he was not at the top of the list, he was adequately inglorious to take the critical role of being the first guest to arrive.
Kuro Hayashi of Detritus,
the steward called as Kuro crossed the threshold into the dining hall, speaking his name and homeland as proudly as any nobles, proclaiming him to be worthy of entry to the feast. It was the first time Kuro could recall feeling anything but shame in his origins. Something about the recognition of the lane that raised him as worthy of a tartan and a formal announcement placed it on equal footing as grand places like Ville-d'Is and Saguenay. The gentle applause by the scattered collection of waitstaff welcomed him into the hall. Within were long rows of tables set with crystal goblets and too many sets of cutlery, atop tablecloths so perfectly white that a single spot of spilled gravy would condemn them to the incinerator. Tucked in an alcove behind the string quartet were the three weavers, ready to watch the parade of their creations and making no effort to hide their delight in Kuro's appearance. He descended the stairs to find his seat, while the steward tried to fight off a panic attack at having to announce the next guest entirely out of order.
Sir Craigleith McCool, Thane of Erie.
The staff again interrupted their laying out of placemats to applaud his entry, and then smoothly continued the choreographed setting of tables, a pattern that continued as the steward introduced more students. The considered pause between each student seemed at first to be a sign of respect, letting those in attendance fully admire the new entrant. As the hall slowly filled, though, Kuro became convinced that it was the reverse. The steward was waiting for the servers' hands to be free, and the gentle music playing kept them in time. A good portion of the steward's fluster was that the missing fireflies were throwing off the rhythm. "Do you know where they are?" asked Magnus, finding his assigned seat near enough to Kuro to converse. He didn't, nor did Oliver or Morgana, who wondered after Sean and Jennifer. It seemed the only lodger who knew anything about their absence was Charlie, and she was doing a very good job of pretending that she didn't. "They're probably just doing their hair or something," said Charlie of the dozens of missing students of which both Brian and Julia had shaved heads. Then continued as if her next comment followed naturally from the previous. "Everyone's kilts look so good. Mine's a little bright, but that's because it's mostly my mom's colors, with the Alfheim gold and the Valkyrie white. And the electric blue streak is because she was also an enchantress. And the little black and red bit is about my dad because he's a Blandlander, which the weavers put in even though they aren't supposed to count strays and tartans, which was really nice of them. And hey, Arthur, I like your colors and how you matched your eyes to them, but I thought they'd be more like your mom's." "Thanks," replied Arthur, his voice flat as always, but a hint of pride snuck through in the way he carefully neatened the pleats as he sat down. "It's just the wood tartan since I'm adopted, forest browns and greens, but they snuck in a bit of hunter green and brass like my dad's uniform, and a little line of silver and violet for my mom." As the room filled with students of ever-increasing pedigree, Charlie maintained a constant stream of commentary on their hair and accessories, interrupted only occasionally to interrogate one of her neighbors on the intricacies of their tartan. Kuro was used to Charlie's enthusiastic rambling, and it faded into the background noise. He scanned the hall, noting some of the things Charlie mentioned. Moira in her mother's colors, Azalea with her hair trussed up so it didn't hide her face, Evelyn made up to look like she'd stepped out of a royal portrait, the stripes of ogre yellow on Meredith's kilt. But rather than appreciating how regal or pretty those things made people look, he couldn't help observing the hall as he would a night market in Bytown. The street rat was baked so deeply into him that even at this most formal of occasions, he scanned for escape routes, judged the value of items and the attentiveness of their owners, measured the rhythm of the room, and felt for eyes on him. One pair, disinterested but steady from the head table. Sir McCool, despite the distance across the hall and his obvious preference to attend to the dinner roll in front of him, continued his duty of ensuring Kuro remained boring. For his part, Kuro intended to do all he could to reward his warden with an entirely uneventful evening. Yet, something entirely outside his control seemed to be happening beneath the notice of anyone not acquainted with petty crimes. The announcements had finished. The other knights and regent, being the last to enter, had been seated at the head table when something passed among the servants. It was a flash of eye contact and subtle nods between members across the hall who'd had no interaction before that point. If Kuro were more able to become engrossed in the revelry like everyone else, he would never have noticed. One server caught the attention of the steward, drawing him away from his post at the door, just as a thief might distract a guard to allow their partner to slip in. There was a growing tension in the room that the fine decor and anticipation of food masked. Kuro didn't know whether to shout or hide as a footman emerged from a shadowy alcove and gave a clear signal to someone in the hall. The music stopped. Then, as the assembled students fell into a startled silence at the loss of the gentle accompaniment to their conversations, it restarted with vigor. The cello let out an extended, scraping wail of a sound as the violins began pounding out a loud and distinctively Blandlands melody. On that cue, marching through the door were all the Fireflies in a disorderly gang. They had all been given the same pattern by the Weavers, the simple black and red Blandland plaid. Now, though, they were a rainbow of vibrantly individual tartans. No two matched. Some were attempts at the personal tartans in the style of the older wizarding families, but others had abandoned the whole notion. One was tie-dyed. Another alternated through the colors of the rainbow along its pleats. One had turned the whole thing vibrant pink along with their hair and nails. The only thing that did match among all of them was a self-satisfied grin. Their brash entrance was given a mixed response. The waitstaff and footmen, most of whom were strays and must have conspired with their fellow Blandlanders, applauded heartily. Many of the well-bred students tutted and sneered at their lack of propriety. The poor steward was catatonic with a horror of the unscheduled, undocumented, unsanctioned, and unannounced entrance. The head table had mixed reactions. The knights somewhat divided on whether to appreciate the audacity, joining McCool and Amririus in raising a glass in salute, or to reach for their swords like boars. The regent was unabashedly delighted, his whole body bouncing with laughter as he applauded their boldness. All of that, though, was drowned out by the hoots and hollers of the lodgers, who screamed as if they'd just won the National Lacrosse Championship. Pleased by the uproar they had caused, the swarm of Fireflies dispersed to find their friends and soak in their own personal glory. Marie, Jennifer, and Sean wandered up to the third-year tables together, working to calibrate their smug swagger against a respectful apology for disrupting the event.
That was incredible,
said Charlie, drawing out the last word until her lungs emptied, then directed her praise straight at Marie.
I told you there was nothing to worry about, and look at everybody's kilts. You did such a good job.
Marie tried to shush Charlie and deflect attention away from herself, but that just earned her more. Gregory and Oliver paused their celebration of Sean's audacious rainbow kilt to inspect Marie's relatively understated choice. It was mostly black, with a few lines of violet and blue, like the shimmer of sunlight on a raven's feathers. Marie wilted under their suspicious stares and retreated behind Jennifer, whose explosion of reds and pinks would surely pull attention away. But Marie's defender quickly betrayed her confidence.
Without Marie, we would have been stuck wearing bland plaid. We all look like Scottish lumberjacks.
Stop it, Marie grumbled. You're going to get me in trouble.
From who? Chided Jennifer. All you did was change the colors. Brian's the one they'll be mad at for organizing that entrance stunt, and most of the staff were okay with it.
She gestured across the hall to one of the senior Firefly boys, who was making a valiant attempt to respectfully hear the grievances of the steward without bursting into a fit of giggles.
From them,
Marie muttered, and tipped her head slightly in the direction of the Weavers, who were interrogating a girl with a bubblegum pink braided mohawk. She didn't even hesitate in directing the three women to Marie. Their heads snapped in unison to follow the pointed finger, then their eyes locked on their prey. In perfect synchrony, they turned and strode across the hall. While they were not large women, their imposing presence forced Jennifer and Sean to retreat, allowing them to surround Marie.
You did this?
White inquired.
All of this,
Black continued.
The patterns, the colors, even the hair,
Red added, as though finishing their collective thought.
I'm sorry,
replied Marie, spinning as each Weaver spoke, trying to apologize to each individually and all three at once. Charlie rose to defend her roommate, but the Weavers seemed to anticipate her movement and moved smoothly to block her.
You're sorry?
Queried Red.
She's sorry,
confirmed White.
Whatever for?
Asked Black.
You made them for us, and I ruined your work, said Marie.
Did you?
Asked White.
Impossible,
asserted Black. Marie was getting dizzy trying to follow their ping-pong commentary.
What do you mean?
She asked. Red showed some mercy and cracked a slight smile.
One cannot ruin Blandland's tartan, she explained.
White joined in to confirm the claim.
The pattern is so dull, it is improved by spilled ink and mustard stains.
But you made them for us, argued Marie.
A machine made the cloth,
interrupted Black, as the three shared a look of revulsion at the suggestion that they would weave something so mundane as bland plaid.
And, out of an obligation to an ill-considered tradition, we fashioned it into kilts, added White. But you and your fellow Fireflies have improved on the design in myriad fashions, Black concluded. The three then punctuated their assessment with a smile and a nod of approval. Marie, still rattled and disoriented, asked, "So you're not mad?" "Quite the opposite," said White, and then they started bouncing alternative compliments between each other. "Impressed," "astounded," "charmed," "unofficially, of course," "of course, of course." They all nodded again in agreement at how important it was that they were so utterly delighted only personally, and that their pleasure did not reflect at all on their office. "We do, however," said White, raising a finger of pause, "want to know how you did it," finished Red. "I really don't know," explained Marie. "It's just something I do." She demonstrated by brushing her finger along the loose edge of the kilt. Colors shot up along each thread as her finger passed over them. "Remarkable," the three weavers said in unison. "You think so?" asked Marie, incredulous. "I thought people like you would be able to do it even better." "Not in the least," said White. "We rely on one of the largest, clunkiest, and most complicated enchanted looms in the three kingdoms to approximate what you just did," complained Black. Red took over. "If you're ever considering working with us, you may have a place in this palace." "Even if you just want to fill in for a weekend," interjected White. "We could use a vacation." Marie fidgeted and fussed with her hair, uncomfortable with the unvarnished compliments. "Thank you very much," she replied, more to the floor than to the women. They each offered a small curtsy in turn before moving off. "Very pleased to make your acquaintance, Marie Akinwande," said White. "We hope to see more of you in the future," said Black. "Do enjoy your evening," concluded Red. And then the three swept off to do whatever royal sartorialists do when everyone is already dressed their best. "You look awfully pleased with yourself," observed Magnus as Marie found her seat. After the hurricane of worry followed by a crashing wave of praise, she was practically glowing. "It's just nice to think someone likes what I can do," said Marie. "Like there might be a place for a Blando like me." Charlie threw her head back in exasperation. "I keep telling you that everyone thinks you're great. You fit in way better than Kuro and Arthur, and they never worry about that kind of thing." She was entirely wrong about the boys' worries, though it was oddly comforting that she believed them confident in their place in the world. Jennifer Tanaka gave voice to a shared feeling of the Fireflies. "I get it, Marie. It always feels more like we're visitors, like we're exchange students or something, and someday they'll send us home and we'll never come back again." Speaking of being Blandlanders, Sean joined the discussion. "Was that whole thing with the Weavers weird? They don't seem quite normal." "Does anything here seem normal?" Oliver stuttered out, gesturing to the first course, which was in the process of being served. It was a delicate mound of kelp, garnished with phosphorescent mushrooms, with a steamed crayfish posed at the side of the dish like a footman bowing over the salad. The feast proceeded without deviation or interruption, as was proper for such things. If a course were left for too long, then dinner companions would feel obligated to make conversation without the possible excuse of having to take another bite. Were they too short, then attendees might feel rushed or be unable to eat their fill before being served the next. Given that Kuro always ate as though every meal were his last and could be stolen from him at any moment, and Charlie didn't let something so trivial as chewing slow her speech, the two maintained a steady conversation. The others around them, who were more well-mannered, or at least better at following cues from the knights at the head table, joined sparingly, mostly to evaluate the meal. Kuro noted that the freshwater mussels were much better hot and fresh, rather than scavenged from the trash as he was accustomed. That description did not at all help those who were already struggling with the mussel's unique texture, which was something akin to boiled erasers drizzled with mucus. There was general agreement on the haggis being the least challenging dish, despite having been told what was in it, and that the summer court was terrible at dessert. They were presented with something called a pudding, but it was more like a bad cake. It must have taken incredible feats of culinary magic to create, given that it was simultaneously soggy and dry, too rich and entirely bland, and soaked in a sauce that was probably lovely icing before being watered down with enough brandy to make their eyes cross. It couldn't be that the cooks didn't know how to make sweets.
As for breakfast, they'd serve tea cakes with enough jam and syrup to make the students' teeth ache. They concluded that the pudding was meant to add a measure of challenge to the evening, as immediately following they were expected to dance. That would be a feat given the added mass of the lead-weight cake and the after effects of its dressing.